Facebook page. Also getting ready to be live here on YouTube as well. We are going to react to the SEC schedule announcement when it comes down in just a couple of minutes. So I'm looking forward to having a lot of you as a part of that with us. Of course, we already know the first piece of news here. Georgia adding a game, season opener against Arkansas on the road, given about as kind a gift as you could have gotten from the SEC on that front today. Brett McMurphy, the college football reporter, has already talked to some gambling experts. Georgia, a 24-point favorite, traveling to Arkansas to begin the season. So big news and good news in terms of the week one announcement for Arkansas. That came down around 3 p.m. this afternoon. That Georgia, we had wondered, would it be Alabama, the game that, based on the old schedule, and we'll find out here in a few minutes just how much the old schedule still does hold up. But based on the old schedule, Alabama would have been Georgia's first SEC game, but things have been wildly changed, wildly made different. Georgia won't play Alabama to begin the SEC slate this year, as had initially been thought. It will travel to Arkansas. That announcement came down a little bit earlier, and we are only a couple of minutes away from the SEC beginning this televised product tonight on the SEC network. And I'm in my living room so I can see it good, but that's why it seems a little dark. I can promise you that my house is not really as dark sometimes as it comes across on the video. But nonetheless, I wanted to be in my living room so I could see this and react with you and talk about it as that happens. So we're going to be doing that. We'll be taking your comments, kind of rolling through all of this, and just generally speaking, just having kind of a good time with all this. I think it's really fun. I mean, obviously for so many of us, so much of the college football conversation recently has been about the virus and kind of everything associated with that. That's obviously not something that you love talking about any more than you have to. So to be able to focus in on today on the actual games themselves, the season as it gets ready to begin, I think it's a much, much better scenario, much more enjoyable. And so we're going to get a chance to do that here in just a little bit. While we're waiting on the SEC Network show to come on the air, I'll also take a lot of your comments, and we'll do that on both Facebook and YouTube. And as I said before, just generally speaking, kind of have a good time with some of this. So let's get ready to do that right now. Your thoughts on the Arkansas game, on the build-up for where we'll see the Alabama game fall for Georgia, where we'll see the Florida game fall for Georgia. Does it maintain its date on that October 31st timeline? How about the Auburn game, a game that had famously been moved up to October? How different is that going to be than what we initially thought it was, how it was going to play out? So a lot of potential changes, a lot of things to potentially be, very much paying attention to. So we'll look forward to doing that. YouTube comments kind of all already coming in. By the way, Colby Curry mentions this. There was news on the SEC front, and I guess still related to Georgia. Just a few minutes ago, it was announced that Cade Mays, the offensive lineman transferred from Georgia to Tennessee, he did not get granted immediate eligibility by the NCAA. So Mays will not be playing for the Vols this season. And I guess in some respects, I didn't necessarily expect him to, although when it comes to the NCAA, you can't really predict this stuff half the time anyway. But that was news that just came down a moment ago, and I appreciate Colby for reminding me to mention this. Cade Mays did not get his immediate eligibility. He will not be playing for Tennessee here this year. Brandon Berry wonders if it's still too late to get Arizona State in the SEC. Obviously, a lot of those Pac-12 schools looking for somewhere to play, wishing they could have a schedule announcement like the one that the SEC is going to get to enjoy here in just a little bit. I'm going to pull up your comments on Facebook. We'll take some of those there too. And we should be really about a minute or two away from the start of all of this on the SEC Network. Reaction coming as we see it happen. Y'all help me keep track of all of it, and we'll just try to cover all of that ground here today. Jay Bryan says that it's karma for Cade Mays. I will say that for some of the guys that have transferred out of Georgia, that's, it's not really been something I've necessarily been all that critical of, and I've, been fine with whatever they wanted to do. In the case, however, of Mays, his decision to leave Georgia after seemingly having a pretty solid position on the Georgia roster would have almost certainly have been an inside track to start at some position for Georgia this year. Admittedly, I did, probably feel, speaking as a fan here for a moment, I probably did feel a little bit different about Mays' departure than maybe some of the other transfers we've seen out of UGA. So I have no doubt that some Georgia fans will be glad that Mays didn't get his immediate eligibility, and I'll be curious to see what the reaction from Tennessee fans on this ends up being. Darius Brown. He's got jokes here today. Let's see what else is going over. Connor Raleigh, by the way, has checked in via our internal chat to say he thinks it's over under 9.5 minutes before the SEC actually announces this. Hopefully it won't be that long, but that will give us more time for your comments if it does. I see Greg McElroy on the set there with Dari Noka. So some breakdowns about to get going here and some announcements will be coming in just a few minutes. I'm also curious of this. Will they do like the team-by-team announcement? Roman Harper on the set there as well on the SEC Network. Will they do the team-by-team announcement, or will they do a grid schedule where they say, here's what's coming up. We already told you September 26th. Here's what's coming up the following weekend. I don't have to tell you. You already know this. I am very easily fooled, very easily confused. If they go grid schedule week by week, and I have to write this thing down every time they go and pull up a Georgia week, I'm going to be very, very, very confused by the time all this is done. So we'll have to follow that and see how all that plays out. The Mays news continues to be big here in our comment sections. A lot of folks asking about that. Alex Mitchum asked if the Gators are crying yet. There has supposedly been a lot of crying, whether it was, rumors. ESPN had this report. I want to say Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports may have had this, that when the SEC coaches had a meeting last Thursday, it got very contentious, and there was a lot of discussion. So they're showing the week 26, the week 1, September 26th schedule up there on the TV screen now. There was a lot of discussion about the very inexact formula that seemed to be used for for who got what game, and some teams seem to get a tougher schedule than others, and supposedly it was supposed to be balanced on the basis of strength and of schedule, but there was very little specifics in terms of how that actually went down. Allegedly, there was some contentious arguments on the part of SEC coaches about that, and at one point in time, it was rumored that Florida may even be arguing about, the initial discussion, and all of this is just sort of rumor mill stuff, but the initial discussion was, hey, maybe they'll just add the next 2 years' worth of rotational opponents, which for Florida would have meant Texas A&M and Alabama. So maybe there was some complaining on the part of Florida about that initially. There had been rumors that maybe Alabama had done the same thing. Ultimately, it's hard to know what's real about this and what's not. By the way, also speaking of rumors, you'll remember that if you follow Twitter closely, all right, so we're going October 3rd here. We're getting into it. So Georgia will play Auburn on October the 3rd. This just coming down now from the SEC Network. So how about that? A week 2 game for Georgia, a home game against Auburn. That coming down here just a moment ago. That's a week 2 game. Texas A&M also plays Alabama that same week. This just happening right now. South Carolina at Florida. Those are the big games there that weekend. But Georgia will play Auburn on week 2. So a very early start for Georgia and Auburn. This game initially slated to be October the 10th. That game now moved up to October the 3rd. So we get an indication here pretty early right away that you can expect this schedule to be wildly different than what we initially had expected it to be, when we were first planning for the season, the dates we thought would be slotted for these games, the order in which these SEC games are going to take place appear that they're going to be pretty different here. Georgia and Auburn going to play October the 3rd. This just coming down a moment ago. Now we're going to October the 10th. That gives you Tennessee at Georgia. So after all the talk of Georgia, Tennessee being moved to November, that is not going to be the case here. October the 10th, Tennessee will come to Georgia. That means Georgia looking at, depending on your perspective on this, back-to-back fairly difficult games against both Auburn and Tennessee, although with SEC-only competition, they're all going to be pretty tough. And Florida will play at Texas A&M the same week Tennessee plays at Georgia. So mark that down. Florida at Texas A&M. That's one of the added games for the Gators. That'll go down the same week that Tennessee plays at Georgia. That coming down on October the 10th. This just a moment ago. So we are off and running with the schedule announcement here. Georgia will open against Arkansas September 26th. It's Auburn on October the 3rd. And it is Tennessee going down on October the 10th. So a road game and then 2 consecutive home games for Georgia to begin the 2020 campaign. The Tennessee game being moved from its original date in late November. That was supposed to be November the 14th or mid-November, November the 14th. Now moved all the way up to October the 10th there for the for this. Now we're moving on to week 4 here. And in week 4, Georgia goes to Alabama. At Alabama on October the 17th. Just coming down a moment ago, it's at Alabama, October the 17th for Georgia. That same weekend, LSU's at Florida. So if you're looking for that tough game to go along with this, you're getting that. Georgia at Alabama on October the 17th. We'd heard guesses. Would it be at the beginning of the season? Would it be at the end of the season? It is kind of towards the middle there for Georgia at Alabama on October the 17th. So for folks and fans who are worried about the potential of not being fully integrated into your offense by the time you had to go to Tuscaloosa, if you thought that was going to be in the September slate, that is not the case. Georgia will have 3 games under its belt, coronavirus permitting, before going to Alabama on October the 17th. So that is a big one there. Georgia traveling to the Crimson Tide on October the 17th for a massive, massive SEC showdown. And as I said before, that'll also come the same day that LSU is at Florida. So we will follow all of that. We are now going to quickly move to October the 24th. This would have been an away game, I should say a bye game for Georgia and before this, but it will not be. Georgia's at Kentucky on October the 24th. At Kentucky on October the 24th. That is Georgia at Kentucky here. So what should have been the week off prior to the cocktail party is not going to be that. Georgia does not get its preferred traditional bye week prior to Florida. If we were to say that Florida is going to be on October the 31st, that is not going to be the case. That is going to be a Georgia trip to Kentucky. Is that still the race weekend in Kendall? Some of y'all know that better than I do. It's always been something that Georgia fans wanted a little earlier. Of course, I guess this year, maybe that's not even going on, but they'd want a little earlier trip to Lexington. Maybe this is an example of that. Not as cold as otherwise could be. Same weekend you get that. You do get third Saturday in October between Alabama and Tennessee. So if you're looking for a traditional run, actually that'll be fourth Saturday. So Tennessee, Alabama, not third Saturday in October. It's the fourth Saturday in October. Georgia and Alabama will play third Saturday. Now we move on to October the 31st, and that is a bye week for Georgia. Georgia does not have an opponent on Halloween. So Georgia's bye week is October the 31st. LSU is at Auburn, but there is no Georgia on October the 31st. Does that mean they'll play Florida the following week? There is also no Florida on October the 31st, and this literally just coming down as we're doing this right now. And I apologize for not looking into the screen, but no Georgia, no Florida on October the 31st. The original scheduled date for that, and of course, if there are cancellations because of the virus we've seen in Major League Baseball, all of this could be changed. All of this could be topsy-turvy. But for now, it looks like the SEC's made the decision to move Georgia, Florida back a week. We'll find out some confirmation on that for a moment. But both the Dogs and the Gators looking at a bye week right now on October 31st, which was the original date of that scheduled game. They are on the SEC network breaking this down at the moment. Not a ton of big games on this particular date. LSU at Auburn, I guess, will own October the 31st. So that's a pretty big game, LSU at Auburn. But no Georgia, no Florida on that front. So it looks like we're setting up for the following Saturday to potentially be Georgia and Florida, which most people expect to be a showdown for the SEC East. We will follow that in just a moment. Noah Sheldon, looking forward to those lousy, stinking Gators. He's weighing in on YouTube about that. A lot of folks weighing in on the Facebook side of things, too. We're going to continue to take your comments. Nick Jones says, good time for a bye week. That could be true for a couple of reasons. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm selfish here. I have young children. If one of these moments in which the game is scheduled to be Halloween Day, if somehow Georgia could work out of this thing and have a bye prior to playing Florida the following week, in this household with an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old and a wife who loves Halloween, in this household, that will have worked out pretty well if that is indeed the case. Christopher White says, I got my wish on that. Listen, I've told you, I'm not going to lie about being a little bit selfish about this. I did not want that game to be on Halloween this year if at all possible, and now it's not going to be. Matt Rukavina says, you still got Kakalaki, Vandy, Tennessee to go. Matt, check your notes on that. Tennessee for Georgia coming in on October the 10th here. James Crump says, looks like November 7th for Georgia and Florida. Certainly appears to be the case. Nicole House wondering how in the world you're going to socially distance the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That's not typically the way we think of the cocktail party going. That's certainly true. We'll have to see this year how that works out. LeBrian Hudson says 5 games in a row. Yeah, you wouldn't really want – remember, you only get one of these, LeBrian, though, so you don't really want one coming much before this. You wouldn't really want to do that. So I would say that if Georgia was able to – and they've gone to commercial break on the SEC network. But if Georgia was able to preserve its bye week prior to the cocktail party, I would say that for the most part, that would be treated as a very good piece of news. Remember, there had been some reports coming out of Louisiana a couple of weeks ago, and that LSU might not be able to have a bye week before Alabama, something that it very much wants, the same way Georgia would have wanted one before Florida. So no one was guaranteed of getting what they wanted. I know that Philip Fulmer, the Tennessee athletic director, really wanted Tennessee, Alabama to stay on third Saturday in October just to preserve that tradition. I guess there have been 1 or 2 years where it hasn't been the third Saturday in October, but for this particular year, that's not going to be the case as they play October the 24th instead. Sean Thomas, some funny stuff. Joseph Rivas is no fan of Greg McElroy, would appear. But we got a lot of folks checking in, a lot of folks commenting. There's a commercial break right now. The SEC network going to milk this for everything it's worth. So I'll look for some comments to take. Jay Bryan says, bet we finish the season with Florida. At this point in time, I would say that Georgia, assuming it doesn't already know what it's getting, probably hopes that's not true, because I think that Georgia would like to have that bye week prior to Florida. I think that it would. So if it's another opponent we see come up next for UGA, then I would say that some folks maybe with Inside the Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall may take it as a little bit of bad news that the bye week came prior to a game against an opponent other than Florida. I would say maybe that's the case, but we'll follow it and see where it goes. Let's see what else. John William Adams noting that the game for Georgia against Mississippi State is still yet to be announced. You've got that forthcoming here in just a moment. Cassandra Turner weighing in just like me to say that she's glad that Georgia-Florida is not going to be Halloween. Yeah, I have to say that while my professional obligations, Georgia-Florida, the cocktail party, especially for someone like me, that would have definitely come first. But my wife would be very, very happy. Now we just need coronavirus to stay at bay, so we don't have to end up having to use one of these, that bye week for one of these makeups. And wouldn't that be interesting? For these teams that want concurrent buys, like Georgia and Florida have the same bye week. For teams like that, to think that one team may have to play a makeup game that Saturday, one team might not. It's obviously speculating about something that may or may not come true, but it is certainly an example of just how different, this upcoming season is going to be in comparison to what we're typically used to. Pete Ellis says he likes Alabama at 4, gives Georgia time to work on the offense. That's right. You've got, some very interesting tune-ups. Arkansas, Auburn, Tennessee, although I think in the case of most people, with Tennessee, the preseason number 11 team, Tennessee first among the others receiving votes, essentially the 26th best team, according to the coaches poll. Those are not exactly, Louisiana Monroe-style tune-ups before Georgia and Alabama. Tennessee still expects to be good defensively. Auburn's got returning quarterback, also expecting to be pretty good defensively. So Georgia will play Auburn, Tennessee, Bama. I think it'll be interesting. I want to try to do some crunching of the numbers on this at some point in time. How frequently Georgia, over the course of recent years, has played a 3-game stretch as tough as Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama. I mean, if Tennessee's the easy game in that stretch, then you're talking about a pretty difficult stretch, but within an SEC-only schedule, we knew this was coming. And it looks like the television folks are getting ready to come back on the air here. Noah Sheldon says he thinks that Florida's got a brutal 2-3 start. Yeah, I'm going to have to look a little bit deeper at the full schedule for some of these other teams in a little bit. Brian Presley, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate you being here and appreciate you saying what you said. We're looking forward to having some fun breaking all this down right now. Jamie Myers likes the idea of a year in Jacksonville, then coming back to Atlanta for a game against Georgia, Florida, all ahead of what we think is going to be a schedule announcement for Georgia, Florida here in just a moment. Matt Rukavine on the subject of when the Egg Bowl is going to fall into place in the schedule. We should be getting close to hearing about that here in a moment. Jarvis Hanna checking in on the other news of the day involving Cade Mays. Jacob O'Neill also pointing out that Florida does have a bye week the same week that that Georgia does, leading some credibility to the speculation. We may be about to see Georgia-Florida slated for November 7th. Caitlin Rose Oliveira. I wonder if these are all the moms that are saying this with me, that glad that Georgia-Florida is not Halloween. John Benton says, if an SEC team goes undefeated with these schedules, it's incredibly impressive, really bordering unbelievable. I would agree with that. I mean, I just think that our entire calibration for what a good season is has to be completely rethought. You know, what you thought of as an 8-win team, I think you have to start thinking about as a 5-5, 6-4 type team. And I just think you have to really recalibrate some of this kind of stuff, as we should be ready to get back into the schedule here. Dari Noka's brought us back from break on the SEC network. They're going to drag this thing out on this next announcement here for a moment, which could be the one a lot of Georgia fans have been waiting for. Here we go. November 7th. It is the cocktail party. November 7th for Georgia, Florida. After a week off, it is Georgia, Florida in Jacksonville. Only 4 SEC games that weekend. Tennessee at Arkansas, Vanderbilt at Mississippi State, Texas A&M at South Carolina. So there's no question, no doubting what the big game of that weekend is going to be. Georgia, Florida in Jacksonville. Now, we should note that Georgia and Florida have played at 3:30 p.m. for years and years and years. But for all these games right now, these are times to be determined. So one of the things I had said was, just given the talk that has been built up, the talk that's been generated about Georgia, Florida, would you prefer an earlier date for that game? In the event you ran the risk of some sort of coronavirus cancellation, you could at least say you got that one in. Would you be in favor of that? I thought there was an argument to be made for that. Instead, these two teams will play pretty close to their normal date, much later on in the season. You'll need to cross your fingers for some health and safety to continue to work its way out. And then for all the talk of Dan Mullen's a game coach, Dan Mullen's a developer of quarterbacks, that at some point in time, he with Florida is going to surpass Georgia. We've all heard that said over and over again. Well, 2020 for these two teams, for that coach in particular, Dan Mullen, and the narrative that has existed around him, in 2020, this is a put up or shut up year. Show me your quarterback, get it done, and if not, I never want to hear it again. Let's move on to November 14th for right now. Week after Florida for Georgia sees a game at Missouri. That feels like a break to be going. Now, it's a road trip to Columbia, Missouri. Georgia has never lost there in SEC play. So it's at Missouri for Georgia, November 14th, the week after the Florida game. That same weekend, you have, Alabama, LSU. So Alabama, LSU, much like Georgia and Florida, have the same bye week prior to that. They will get a chance to play on November 14th, a little later for those two teams than we're typically used to seeing that. But at LSU for Alabama on week 8, November the 14th. Oh, my gosh, can we just please play these games? Can we please stay healthy and play these games? You also have Texas A&M at Tennessee that weekend. You have Arkansas at Florida that weekend, so a little bit of an easy one for the Gators as well, coming off the game against Florida. We'll see if Alabama and LSU also got a favor the week after their game against each other. Auburn is at Mississippi State that weekend. That's been tricky before. I'm not quite sure about this year. And Vanderbilt at Kentucky that same weekend, if you were so interested in that. So massive, massive schedule announcements coming down. You can't even put into words how big all this is. Alabama, LSU, November 14th. Georgia, Florida, November 7th. Huge, huge goings on here around the SEC. This is so much fun. So much fun. November 21st, we're getting to this. It's week 9. Georgia will host Mississippi State. On November 21st, week 9, Georgia will host Mississippi State. Which means who's left for Georgia to finish the regulars? Who's left for Georgia then? Who am I forgetting about? Some of y'all are better on the fly than I am. That's also Auburn, Tennessee that weekend on week 9. So Tennessee at Auburn that weekend, but Georgia will host Mississippi State late in the year, November 21st. Not a ton of examples of very late November SEC games for Georgia other than Auburn typically. Last year it was Texas A&M played very late. This year it'll be Mississippi State played very late. That same weekend, Florida's at Vanderbilt. So Florida gets a really pretty easy stretch after the Georgia game. I guess Georgia maybe arguably does too, although Mississippi State probably rates a little higher than Vanderbilt does. LSU also got Arkansas the week after that. Now we move on to Week 10 action. This is November 28th, and that is Iron Bowl. November the 28th is the Iron Bowl. That is Auburn and Alabama. Georgia is at South Carolina. At South Carolina on November 28th for Georgia. That just coming down a moment ago, a revenge game for the Dogs. A revenge game for the Dogs comes November 28th. So Georgia will finish. Is that right? No. Georgia against South Carolina coming down on November the 28th here. So pretty big news on that front for the Dogs and the South Carolina Gamecocks. Just coming down. They'll play Week 10 on November the 28th. Don't forget SEC Championship this year all the way back to December the 19th. So we're moving much later into the schedule this year. But that game is going to take place on November the 28th. Joseph Kennedy says it's kind of a top-loaded schedule. He says playing most of the good teams earlier on the year. Jacob O'Neill says my TV's way behind. Is it really that far behind? I feel like my TV's kind of always behind, but if I'm finding that much later than y'all, I guess that must be on my provider here. Ken O'Taylor pointing out that leaves Vanderbilt for Georgia's final game. Weird to think that Georgia started the 2019 season against Vanderbilt and will now end the 2020 season against Vanderbilt. Not a traditional rival, not a very significant game, at least you'd hope it's not, for Georgia. Maybe reminiscent of the 9/11 year in 2001 when Georgia played Houston to close out the 2001 season. You do get Vanderbilt at Georgia for that. And, as we pointed out a moment ago, it is not the final Saturday of the season for the Iron Bowl, although I guess maybe they kept their somewhat normal schedule on that, just not the final one there. So Vanderbilt coming to Georgia on December the 5th. I can't really tell you from the SEC. But look at that, Florida, Tennessee. So that's interesting. So not a big rivalry game between Vanderbilt and Georgia to close out the regular season, but one of the bigger rivalries in the SEC, Florida, Tennessee. So you do get a name brand game that weekend with Florida, Tennessee, a game that traditionally has been played September. In the early years of the SEC and CBS, that was always around third Saturday in September. That kind of started the CBS college football slate, kind of right after the U.S. Open tennis tournament. That's traditionally been an early season game. This year, that'll be a late season game. Also, a rivalry between Ole Miss and LSU. The Magnolia Bowl will be Week 11. Texas A&M's at Auburn. That's a pretty big game. Alabama's at Arkansas. It feels like Arkansas is playing a tough game every single Saturday. I mean, it feels like Arkansas is playing a tough game every single Saturday. All right, so we got a few minutes here. Let's just – y'all tell me what you think. I mean, my first glance is I'm not quite so sure. I think that Georgia's probably happy it's got bye week before Florida. That's probably what it wanted. I think that stretch of – and we predicted this. We did predict that somehow – it would feel like some of these tough games got clustered close together. Auburn, Tennessee, at Bama certainly feels like an example of that. And I tell you what's going to be a very popular narrative. A lot of people are going to be saying, watch out for, you're going to hear this, don't shoot the messenger, but you're going to hear this. There's going to be a very popular narrative emerge very quickly amongst gambling public, college football fan who kind of considers himself on the more smart, analytical bent. Georgia going on the road at Kentucky the week after Alabama will be treated as a tough game. We're still waiting to find out about Joey Gatewood's eligibility. That's a guy that, if he is eligible, I could see him becoming the starting quarterback for Kentucky. Remember, also Kentucky plays Auburn week 1, so it could be Gatewood against his old team, potentially. But a road game the week after a road game against Alabama will be viewed as a sneaky tough game. When the subject of trap games comes up, Georgia at Kentucky will be mentioned that way by many people. And you can disregard that if you want in terms of your own belief, but you can expect to hear that here coming up pretty soon. Kelvin Mills says, what is our schedule? I can't watch. So, Kelvin, if you can listen, I don't have fancy graphics tonight, but I'll rattle back through this. Open the season September 26th at Arkansas. October 3rd, home game Auburn. October 10, home game Tennessee. October 17, at Alabama. October 24th, at Kentucky. Bye week on Halloween. November 7, Florida. November 14, at Missouri. November 21st, Mississippi State. November 28, at South Carolina. Closing out the regular season against Vanderbilt. Many people will say it's a front-loaded schedule. It appears that way to me as well. Noah Sheldon's got Florida going 5-5, Georgia going 10-0. That sounds pretty good to me. William Perry says last 4 weeks are a cakewalk to rest up for the SEC championship. William, I believe you're right about that, but you got to get there. You've got to get there for sure. Joseph Kennedy says he thinks Arkansas has a chance of going 0-10, a very good chance. And I think that Joseph's probably right about that. I mean, every time I looked up at my TV screen, it's like Arkansas playing some top 5 team every single Saturday. They're also making a thing on ESPN now, or the SEC network now, of the fact that the Iron Bowl will not be the final game of the regular season this year. But Florida-Tennessee will be a rivalry game to close up the season, going back to 2001 when they also closed out the regular season that year, if memory serves. Anthony White says, I'm not too bad about the schedule. All the teams are having a tough stretch with the schedule, but it's not that bad. Yeah, I don't see anything all that glaring necessarily. I really don't. I'm going to come back to it again, though. I mean, to think that you play 4 very tough games, bye week, then Florida, that stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in 6 weeks. How many SEC teams will play a tougher stretch than that? Use ESPN FPI as your guide here. If you use that as your guide, how many teams play a tougher stretch than that to start the year, or I should say at any point in the year than what Georgia plays right there? Let me see if I can. Let's see if I can pull this up. So here's the preseason FPI. If I can pull it up. Is this even this year? I'm trying to pull this up, y'all. I'm not going to be able to do this on the fly. But if you look at preseason FPI, Kentucky's not going to be that lowly rated of a team. Tennessee, not a preseason top 25 in the human polls, but the analytic stuff will like them okay. Obviously, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, you don't have to say anything about that. Those are measurably tough games. So that stretch of 5 games in 6 weeks for Georgia on paper looks pretty tough. Number 1 on YouTube says, I'm a big UGA fan, but let's pump the brakes a little. Every year, we as fans think the dog is going to whip everybody, end up losing. Let's just wait until we see the first game. And that's probably pretty good advice, although first game against Arkansas may not tell you much one way or the other, but I understand the point that you're getting to there. A couple more comments, and we're going to get ready to get out the door here. On a day we have found out the Georgia game, the full slate of Georgia games. Kevin Caruso says a home game in December. That'll be fun. Cold weather game. Vandy isn't a bad idea for that day. Should be an easy win. Yeah, as I said before, it is reminiscent of when Georgia played Houston in December of 2001. Now, ironically, it was not cold that day in Sanford Stadium. It was actually fairly warm, but you still saw the Santa Claus hats and things like that. So, yeah, maybe Sanford Stadium, for the folks lucky enough to be there, will be decked out in Christmas regalia that day. Darius Brown asking about some of the injury situations for Georgia. I think Keely Ringo suffering an injury. Also, his mom's been under the weather, kind of battling with some illness there too. Pretty good update from Kirby Smart on the injury front this week at DogNation.com. You can check that out across the board. It sounds like Ringo will be out for a while. And, of course, as far as his mom and her ongoing battle with cancer, our prayers continue to be out with her in a big way on that. Ken O'Taylor says, we're home against Auburn and Tennessee. Why is anyone worried? I don't know that worry is necessarily the right word, but it is a little bit of it was eye-opening to me to see that stretch of games come consecutively like that. 1 or 2 more. Austin Kilby says, can we mention the Cade Mays news? Yeah. So Mays just coming down really right before we came on for this brief broadcast, he was not granted immediate eligibility. He will not be playing in 2020. So a setback for the Vols on that front, and Georgia fans seem to be enjoying that right now. Darius Brown looking forward to seeing that Georgia secondary this year. Matt Rukavina says the Big Ten right now crying in its beer. Yeah, well, they're disappointed. they're forced to sign petitions in the faint hopes of trying to restore a season. The SEC fan getting to enjoy a schedule announcement tonight. It's a pretty special day all the way around and a fun thing to be a part of here. I'm going to get ready to wrap up, though. Mike Griffith will have more video coverage for you coming up later on tonight. I believe Connor Riley's going to be with him. I'll have you Dog Nation Daily tomorrow, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I'm looking forward to that. A lot of coverage on the website as well, dognation.com. So check all of that out. This is fun to do this again, man. Big news, sitting here in front of a computer, just kind of riffing on all of this, reacting to it as it happens. I think it's great, man. I think it's great. I'll continue to kind of make my own thoughts on this, see if I can figure out how I feel. We'll talk more about it tomorrow on our program. Y'all have a great night, and thanks for being here. And let's keep our fingers crossed that these games that were just announced, we actually get a chance to enjoy them this fall. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Y'all keep enjoying it. We'll talk again soon.